Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Daniel and welcome to my channel. Today's a very special episode where I'm going to be teaching you beautiful people how to make another batch of delicious wine. This is a recipe that I've personally made before, but I have not shared with you. And in this video, I'm going to be teaching you how to make 1 gallon of grapefruit wine at home. In today's video, I'm going to be going over the recipe that I'm going to use in order to make this 1 gallon of grapefruit wine. I'm going to be going over the method and showing you exactly what you have to do to get your wine started fermenting. I'm going to then talk about the follow-up steps, how to get from the beginning of fermentation all the way up until bottling. And then I'll also cover some things that you should expect when making 1 gallon of grapefruit wine. Before I dive on into the recipe, I just want to remind you beautiful people that if you're having a great time here, if you're enjoying this video, go ahead and hit that like button if you want to see more videos like this. If you want to stay tuned and see the final tasting of this grapefruit wine, then you're going to want to subscribe for future videos. Useful things like useful links and the recipe and the method of making this wine are all down in the description below, so I highly recommend checking it out. So now that that is all out of the way, let's start making 1 gallon of grapefruit wine. The star of today's ingredient list is 1 quart of organic grapefruit juice. I prefer to use bottled juice when making wine because it's way easier than having to crush or juice my own fruit. And also I'm letting somebody else do the quality control for me instead of having to do some guesswork and hope that the grapefruits that I'm picking are gonna turn out to be good. If you don't want to use bottled grapefruit juice, you simply just need to juice grapefruits until you get 1 quart of juice. I definitely recommend that you taste the grapefruit before you go ahead and make a whole gallon of wine. Otherwise, you might end up being disappointed if you have a poor quality grapefruit. The second ingredient in today's recipe is going to be 4 cups or 2 pounds of sugar. The sugar is what the yeast is going to be consuming and turning into alcohol. And then these next 2 ingredients are optional, but I'm going to be using a ½ teaspoon of Yeast Energizer and then a ½ teaspoon of Pectic Enzyme. And now for one of the most important ingredients, we're going to be using a 1/4 teaspoon of Red Star Premier Blanc wine yeast. So that is a quart of grapefruit juice, 2 pounds of sugar, some Pectic Enzyme, some Yeast Energizer, and some wine yeast. But you can get away with just the juice, the sugar, and the wine yeast. And also I must add that once these ingredients are in the carboy, I'm going to be filling it the rest of the way with water. So those are all the ingredients for today's recipe, and you can find that list down in the description below. So now that I have the ingredients list out of the way, let's start adding these ingredients together. But hold on just a moment there. One step that I always forget to mention is before you start adding any ingredients, you want to sanitize all of the equipment that you're going to be using to make this wine. I personally use San Sanitizer. Don't forget to sanitize your equipment. Otherwise, if you contaminate your wine, it could go bad in the process and then you would have to dump the entire batch and that would suck. So now let's roll on into the method of making this wine. So I'm going to start with adding my 2 pounds of sugar. All right, so I have my 2 pounds of sugar added, so let's go ahead and add the Pectic Enzyme and the Yeast Energizer. So this is our Yeast Energizer. Getting ½ teaspoon. Perfect. Pro tip, I always try to add my dry ingredients first because if you're using the same funnel and the funnel gets wet and you add your dry ingredients second, then the dry ingredients tend to stick to the funnel. And also, once your dry ingredients are added and then you add your grapefruit juice and your water, they tend to help rinse all the ingredients down. So now we're adding a ½ teaspoon of Pectic Enzyme. Beautiful. Okay, so now I'm going to be adding my 1 quart of Lakewood organic pure pink grapefruit juice. So this is only organic grapefruit juice and nothing else added. Citric acid is okay, but any 8s or ites and it's no good. So let's go ahead and add this bad boy. What a beautiful sound. Okay, so now we have, look at that beautiful stratification you can kind of see going on there. That's not the right word for it, but so now we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna add a little bit of water and then start shaking this bad boy up. I imagine this is where the inventor of the shake weight got his idea. It may be only 8 pounds of fluid in a glass jug, but shaking this thing is hard work. So the reason we shake this isn't because it won't ferment properly if we don't shake it up, but the reason we shake it is because we want the sugar to be thoroughly dissolved, because we're going to take a specific gravity reading to read the sugar content, which will then give us a good idea of what the alcohol content will be in the future. So we have all the ingredients with the exception of the yeast added. So now let's take a specific gravity reading. All right, so this is right around 1.088 and 1.090, so I'm pretty happy about this. That is going to give us approximately a 13-ish, a 12. It's going to give us around a 12% alcohol content, which for me is just perfect. So let's go ahead and add this back into the carboy. So we have our sugar, we have our grapefruit juice, we have our pectic enzyme, we have our yeast energizer, we have our water, but the magic is not going to happen without our Red Star Premier Blanc wine yeast. So let's go ahead and add 1/4 teaspoon of this wine yeast. And this is just going to go right on top. I'm not going to mix it in at all. And then your wine yeast, I fold it up. You can tape it shut. You can put it in a Ziploc bag. This goes in the fridge to be used later. So now we need to add our airlock. Our airlock has the rubber bung, and then it has this little contraption on here. What the airlock does is, as the yeast eats the sugar and farts out CO2, this is going to pressurize unless we create a way for air to escape. So this little chamber allows air to escape, but also prevents anything from coming in. And the airlock consists of this little plastic chamber, and you fill it up to the line with water. It's a quite little ingenious device. Throw on the cap. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how we begin fermenting our 1 gallon of grapefruit wine. As I already said before, the ingredients and the step-by-step method are down in the description below. And so I showed you guys how we got to this process. I added the ingredients, shook it up real good, checked my specific gravity reading so I could write that down and keep track of it. And then I added my 1/4 teaspoon of wine yeast. I added on my airlock. And so now where do we go from here? So this wine yeast is going to start doing its job. You're going to start seeing some bubbles in the airlock. If not, that's when you're going to have to start doing some troubleshooting. But you should see some bubbles in the airlock. You should see some bubbles all around the water line of your yeast. And that's how you know that it is fermenting. What you'll also see is a brown layer forming at the bottom of your carboy. That's perfectly normal. This is going to be clearing. Sediment is going to be going down. Dead yeast is going to be going down. And that is going to build up down at the bottom here. So in about 2 to 3 weeks, this yeast should be done fermenting as much sugar as it can. And the way that you're going to tell that is by taking a specific gravity reading, and you're going to see that it's at least down to 1.000. For me, at that point in time, I rack it over, I stabilize it, and then I also back sweeten it. For this recipe, you want to back sweeten it with either a 1/4 cup of sugar or a 1/2 cup of sugar. You can also add a cup of grapefruit or white grape juice to it to enhance the mouthfeel. That's completely up to you how you want to customize it. And then after it's stabilized and back sweetened, all that I personally do for this grapefruit wine is wait and wait and wait for this to clear. There's just something about citrus that makes it take forever for wine to clear. So this is going to be at least 4 or 5 months of this just sitting and clearing. And I was able to get my last batch to get fairly clear. Here is a bottle from my last batch, and this is grapefruit wine. You can see that there is kind of some residue in there still because it didn't clear perfectly, but I would say that this cleared pretty dang good for how cloudy this was and for how long it was cloudy. You can put in additives, but I personally don't do that. I just use time and gravity and it will clear it. So once it's done fermenting, once it's stabilized, back sweetened, and then cleared, then it's time for you to bottle and you can enjoy it right away. So that, my friends, is how you make 1 gallon of grapefruit wine. I'm so glad that you all are here. I do hope that you like, comment, and subscribe. It's an easy way to help the channel grow. And if you subscribe, you'll be able to see me do the tasting of this grapefruit wine. And I can tell you that I've already made a batch and it is fantastic. I can't wait to see what we're doing and making next. But until then, I hope you have an absolutely fantastic day. Happy brewing.